The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Breaking Down Security. What you're going to hear this week is not part 2 of our discussion with Tanya Yanka. It's another whole show we recorded while we were talking to her. We actually had 2 separate topics we wanted to discuss. Last week, of course, was all about server-side request forgery, how to find it, how to detect it, how to prevent it. And this week, we're getting into more of a DevOps bent. If you are working in a CI/CD pipeline or you have a lot of automation tools that you're using and you also use GitHub, we wanted to talk about GitHub Actions, what those are, how to use them, how they work. Is it something more than just a fancy IFTTT or something like that? So this is an entirely whole show dedicated to GitHub Actions and how everything works, and then we talk about some additional topics. So if you're in a DevOps shop and you're like, well, I just don't have a good way of automating these processes, GitHub Actions is, they're not a sponsor of the show. Obviously, GitHub is free and open source, and you can use it in your environment in various different ways. But you can consolidate. The idea was that you could use this and GitHub since it's well ingrained to reduce the number of tools you have in your environment and increase your tooling effectiveness. So that was the whole reasoning behind doing this interview with Tanya. We thank her for her time as an InfoSec leader, and check out, of course, we're going to mention this at the end of the show as well, but shehackspurple.dev has a lot of excellent training material if you're interested in web app sec or any DevOps-based items. She's also available for mentoring or project management, contracting and consulting. So if you have a big project and can't afford a full-time PM, reach out to Tanya at shehackspurple.dev and maybe she can help you out. Have a great week. Be well, be safe, and on with the show. All right, so GitHub Actions. I did not know what those were until about 10 minutes before we started recording the show. I should have done some more interesting work on it, but that's why we have the talent on this week. So, Tanya, could you tell us a little bit about what they are?
Okay, so GitHub is a repository, a code repository, basically, like a library where you can keep all your stuff. And you can have private repos or public repos, but they have added an action section. So it's like a workflow that you can add to your code. So let's say I check in code, and then I want it to scan my code for secrets. If I can find a GitHub action that calls a product that does that, then it will do actions for me. So it'll tell me, hey, there are problems in there, and it can do other actions for me. For instance, break the build. So it can actually be a full CI/CD pipeline if you want to, and it can publish to the cloud for you. It can do like static code analysis, software composition analysis. It can do dynamic application security testing. It's awesome. So basically an action can trigger on all sorts of different activities within GitHub. So let's say someone submits a pull request, you can have some actions happen. Let's say I push some code to the master branch, an action happens. And you can also have it have multiple different things happen. So you can have an action where it says, okay, so if there's a pull request, or someone pushes code, do this one, but only for pull requests, do that. And for every push of code, do this. And so I've talked a lot about the idea of having an asynchronous pipeline or like a security pipeline. So now when I check in my code to one of my GitHub repos, I have it string a bunch of different security tests together. But then I have another one where I just have 2 security tests, and then it publishes to Azure for me. So it's like, these are the emergency tests I absolutely need to break the build if something bad happens. But every time code's checked in, I still want to know this stuff. So don't interrupt what the developers are doing, but please send me these reports in the morning.
Okay.
It's so sweet. And a GitHub action, essentially most of them, or the ones I'm doing, it starts up a Docker container and you tell it, let's say like put Linux in there, latest Linux release, cool. And then you say, you could just do like commands like apt-get, go get this, bring it in, make sure it's updated, check all my signatures. Okay, run it against this code, do this, do that. And then you say you're done and then it just disappears. And I have no idea who is paying for all this cloud. But I am really excited they're letting me do all this stuff for free.
So you said it's free. and that's
it's free on open repos.
Okay. So it sounds like you're doing something like IFTTT. If this, then, or then that, or whatever.
Yes.
You've mentioned that it will run security tests. It'll run certain actions. That must mean that there's a lot of integrations that can be added to this. I've seen some of the short research I did showed what looked like a marketplace format. I'm assuming that means there's going to be a lot of plugins.
Yep.
As with many things that we've seen that deal with a lot of plugins and packages and, add this cruft here and add this cruft here, you're going to have bad people do bad things. So what are they doing to vet the integrations or vet the bits that are making it into the marketplace? Are they doing any kind of vetting of that, or are they just letting it be the wild, wild west?
I believe it's currently wild, wild west. I'm not sure. So they've talked a little bit about their security, but as far as I know, basically, unless the company that creates that product made the GitHub action, you should be pretty wary. So they can change the version of the GitHub action whenever they want to, because it's basically just a call to code in their repo. And so you can make a hash of the GitHub action call and make sure that it hasn't been changed. I put a bunch of links in a blog post recently about that. You can also basically, because it's open source, just go in and steal their code and then copy it and create your own action. And then you're safe, but you don't get any updates. Right? So what I've been doing is, so for mine, I've just been creating like workshops and informal things that don't matter. But what I've been doing is whenever there's a product I want to use, I've been writing the vendor and asking, pretty please, will you make me a GitHub action? And a lot of them have responded by making me one. And that's amazing.
That's nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does it take to set up an action? Does it require, I guess you just go to the marketplace, add this action, and that's pretty much it? Or do you have to make your own custom action?
Okay. So if I, as a user, wants to use, let's say, so there's an open source project called Trufflehog. So it's from a company called HashiCorp, but Trufflehog is open source and free. And so there are 2 or 3 different individuals who have created a GitHub action. Trufflehog has not created, HashiCorp has not created one for Trufflehog as far as I know, as of last week when I was playing with it. But so I can go to their GitHub, so I can go to the marketplace and look for Trufflehog, and then a few will come up. I pick one and it says, use this action, and it will give me a little chunk of YAML. And then you have to take that chunk of YAML and then put it into your workflow. So your GitHub action workflow, at first, like you just press a button, say, I want to make a new action, and it'll ask you, what type of action do you want to make? And you can go into the marketplace and choose whatever you want. So the one I was doing, so I used to work for Microsoft, and before that I was a .NET programmer. So I was like, I want to build .NET SDK, right? So I want to build my .NET app. And then I go to Trufflehog and I say, get this action. It gives me this little chunk of YAML. I copy and paste it underneath after building the SDK, because I want to do that first. And then there's a lot of stupid spacing stuff because YAML is very frustrating. It'll just have these red little squigglies from hell. And it's very annoying. I'm learning a lot about YAML and the specialness of spacing versus tabs. But once you can get it to stop yelling at you and having the red spaces, then you go through and you figure out if you have too much or not enough. So some of the actions will have like checkout and do this and do that, but you might have already done that for an action above, in which case it's like, why are you telling me this again, Tanya? So you have to kind of get used to what you've already called and what you still need to call. And once you get used to that, like the language of YAML and exactly what GitHub Actions wants from you, I feel that it's good. But at first I got really annoyed because some of the GitHub Actions will have just 2 lines of code and that's it. And it'll be the name of the GitHub action and just the call to their action and that's it. And I'm like, but this isn't enough. And it's because it needs steps and it needs width and these other components. But other times, if you already have those set up and you grab a GitHub action that has all that extra stuff in it, you're like, why is it upset with me? And it's like, you already told me your steps, Tanya. Don't tell me your steps again mid whatever. I'm confused now. So like you have to kind of get code a little bit to understand.
Okay. So there's a number of integrations. You pull down this plugin. Does it handle logins and API calls for you, or do you have to handle that in a secure manner yourself?
So GitHub Actions GitHub now has a secret store.
Okay.
So it will hold your secrets that you want to use as part of your GitHub Action workflows. So it'll hold your API keys. It'll hold, for instance, so I'm an Azure person. So it'll hold my publish profile from Azure, which has my key and my credentials, and it points to the exact web app service of where I want to publish. And it'll hold that inside of GitHub for me and manage my secret for me, which is pretty sweet.
Okay. Yeah, and that was my question. Like, how do you do all this with your passwords and API keys and things? Okay.
Yep.
So that answers that.
Yeah. So you check it all in and then it just manages it for you, which I feel is beautiful, because that was my first thought too, of like, I'm not putting that in my code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone can see this.
That's right. Yeah. So let's say I am, okay. So you mentioned Trufflehog earlier. They have it now or they don't have it now?
As of last week, they hadn't made one yet. There was just 2 or 3 community members that had made one.
Let's say I am not Trufflehog, but and they're not a sponsor of the show, but hopefully this will
Who's a sponsor of the show, so I can make an example for you?
Nobody is. But I was like, what happens if I run some kind of DevOps thing and you want to use it? What does it take for me to create the action for you to use?
You basically have to know all the things that you are required to call it and execute it in Docker. So each actions really just calls a Docker container. So it loads up a Docker container. You download all of the things from it. You'd have to know how to get the secret out of the GitHub secret store. You tell it to update, and then you run it. And then I believe that they store the results of your test from the container for like 30 days. I don't know how they can afford this, because I thought they were immediately obliterated, but you can still rerun your tests in the same container for, I think, up to 30 days, which is pretty amazing.
Is there an option to not allow that kind of data retention?
I don't know yet.
Or is that okay boomer kind of thinking where it's like, oh, we should, be able to, hold on to our Dockers for as long as we want to. I mean, from a data retention point of view, if I'm able to figure out which Dockers have your potential test data, which is just you copying your production data into your test environment and using it to test with, that's a problem. That's a problem. And I know that there are there are shops out there that are doing that. I know you're shaking your head and you're giving me the middle finger mentally, but
lots of them are doing it.
I know. And if you forget about those Dockers for 30 days, or, somebody happens to figure out, where your Docker data is being stored or your Docker instances are being stored, that could be a bad thing. So I was just thinking, is there a way to not retain those once they've been done and been destroyed? But it is what it is.
There probably is a setting. I think so. GitHub Actions were born in November after I left Microsoft. And so they're relatively new and sort of an immature technology compared to, for instance, like Azure GitHub, around a while. So it's a mature product. So it's still an immature product. Like when I was using it in February before I went to RSA, because I had made a workshop for this, it would keep your actions that you had executed like in your panel of things you had executed, even though I deleted the action. Like the workflow didn't exist anymore. Like, I don't want this garbage in my view. Right. And I found it distracting to have stuff there that it's like, but I'm not using that anymore. And they're like, but it is a thing you previously ran. I'm like, well, how do I get rid of it? And they're like, we don't have a way to do that yet.
Lovely. Well, maybe you could create an action to delete your Docker instance once you're done. I don't know.
Maybe.
So what are you trying to accomplish? You've already mentioned what you're trying to accomplish. What are the benefits of using this over another product? You must have some kind of workflow automation tool already in place. Why move to GitHub? And what is is there anything that's missing from your favorite workflow system that you were using before?
I would say that there are two options. So one is to replace addition to what you're using. So you could, for instance, so let's say you're the security team, you could add like a template to every single one of your repos that checks to see if secrets are checked in. So any of the new code, if it looks like a secret, and you could have it issue a security alert. So then that moment you could go and rotate your keys. And then on top of that, then have it do all the other workflow, let's say in Jenkins or whatever other thing that you're using from then on. But you could just have a bunch of emergency alerts in GitHub Actions. You could also have just different security tests that run. Let me think of an example. So you could have a thing that doesn't block the build, that doesn't do anything else. But every time someone, let's say merges to master, you have it set off like a static application security testing thing that takes like 18 hours to run. And so you have that run once a week. It doesn't bother any developers. It's just running on GitHub Actions. And then you can go and check that report when it's done, right? So it could be an automatic workflow. And then it would be really easy to copy and paste that workflow into all of your repos. And then, have a poor co-op student have to deal with all of those results and look at them. Or an employee that needs punishment. I mean, that's what I mean. But I feel like it could be an addition.
Okay.
I'm not sure how it works with SAST tools yet, or no, not SAST, DAST tools yet, because I haven't figured out how to get it to run, because you need your app to run on something, right? So am I going to put my app onto a container, and then how many containers can I launch? And what if I have APIs and stuff? So right now I've just been doing static code based testing. So again, like, I'm not sure if there's a limitation there. I know a couple companies have told me that they are going to make an action for me, but I have yet to see any from the DAST providers who I've spoken to. That doesn't mean one doesn't exist. I just haven't seen one yet.
Does this handle single sign-on as well? Or let's say you're, God forbid, complicating the issue with two-factor. I mean, two-factor is great, but this would complicate matters greatly if you had to use this to log in to do something and to use two-factor. Does single sign-on work, or some kind of advanced authentication mechanisms?
So I'm not sure at this point if the GitHub Actions can launch your app, like publish it to a thing and then go and test that thing. So I've had it publish to my app service, but then I haven't done anything past to make it test my app service. So I'm not sure if I can have it test to like have it authenticate, go inside my cloud instance, and then test my dev versions, because it needs to spin up a server or platform as a service or whatever you want to call it to run your app. And what if your app doesn't run in a Docker container? And can it launch a Docker container to run the action and then launch another one and have one attack the other? I don't know how to do that yet, but you better believe it, I plan on looking into it.
Okay.
So for multi-factor authentication and single sign-on, like if we're not even sure if we can run it, like testing it dynamically or not yet, that's like a whole nother ball game.
All right. Mr. Betcher, filthy dev that you are, would you use something like this?
Well, I was thinking that if there was an action that would fuzz an app, but then we talked about input validation earlier.
Right.
So if you do it properly, you wouldn't have to fuzz it.
No, but you fuzz to make sure you did it properly.
Well, okay. I guess every developer assumes that they did it properly the first time, right?
I have sat with many a dev and helped them fix their code after they assumed that they had done it correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you check in something, it would fuzz it for you. Would that be something that might be doable here?
So fuzzing requires it to run dynamically, right?
Mm-hmm.
It means your app needs to be running on something. So
yeah.
I feel like there's a bunch of people from the GitHub Actions team that are going to watch this and be like, of course you can do that, Tanya. Why didn't you ask me before this podcast? Well, I didn't know the Bryans were going to ask this.
Nobody listens to the show. It's all good. More
I
people
listen to this show.
More people listen to are going to watch your Twitch than listen to our podcast. I can almost guarantee it. So we'll talk about the Twitch in a little bit. So I guess the upside of this is the YAML code that you're going to copy and paste into your system. It's not overly verbose, right? You said like a couple of lines or something. So if it's doing something that looks odd, you're going to see it fairly quickly. It's like, why is it doing this thing, or why is it sending this to China? So I guess the idea of moderating the marketplace, if it's just 4 or 5 lines of code or less than 10 lines where you can actually look at it and see exactly what it's doing, reduces the chance of some nefarious stuff getting introduced.
You also get to watch it execute live and then can go and look at the execution after, which is really cool. Okay. So you could just go into the little tab that says GitHub Actions, and then click on the one that's executing. And then strangely, you have to click down again into it. I don't know why. And then on like the big screen, it'll actually show you live as it's executing. It reminds me a lot of Azure DevOps, which I used a lot when I was at Microsoft. And so you can see it doing each command. And then you can see if one of the actions breaks your build and why. And you can see the Docker commands that it's running and stuff. And like, I'm not a Docker expert, so I'm just like, oh, that's calling this. And then, gosh, there's a lot of stuff there. Wonder what that means. Oh, look, it's calling my thing again. Good. So definitely you can watch the stuff. And I feel that definitely has a lot of value, but you have to have someone that understands what it is in order to watch it, etc. But I think that you could definitely go through and like run a test version of the GitHub action and like see all of the commands and then decide if you want to run it. The main vulnerability point I would say is if someone changes the GitHub action without you knowing, which is why you would want to either, use a hash of it, copy and paste it into yours, or preferably just use GitHub Actions from trusted sources. So if something is from HashiCorp and it's HashiCorp's product, if it's from Microsoft and it's Microsoft's product, if it's from AWS and it's AWS's product, that is probably awesome.
How much of the internals would they need to know for somebody just like myself to create an action for something like Terraform, for instance? If I created a Terraform, what does it? Is there a how difficult is that for somebody to create something that would do a Terraform? Versus Terraform themselves creating an action for the marketplace?
So I was streaming on a Friday, and I had said on my stream, I wish there was a GitHub action for OAuth dependency check. And then I streamed again on Tuesday, and one of my followers had made one.
Wow. Okay. So
and he made a pull request to my project with it, and it worked. First try. I was like, whoa, thank you. His name's Dark Knight. He's cool. Thank you.
Dark Knight. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, you made me a present. I was so happy because I'd wanted to do it, but I can't make the GitHub action for every product. That's not reasonable, right?
Right.
So it's really cool when the community chips in. And then, of course, now that it's been tested, if we can ask the dependency check team to make it an official part of dependency check, that's even better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the only other requirement of these GitHub actions is if they cost money, you're going to have an account or an API key to be able to call those. Oh, you can even automate your workflow and send messages to your Slack if you're Slack bots or what have you. So one thing I want to go back to, you had mentioned that when you're doing your workflows and you're doing your security testing, you don't stop on fail. You let it continue running on through and just have it send you the report. Why is that? Wouldn't a stop on fail actually make more sense? Or is that anathema to all the CI/CD folk out there?
So it depends. So if it finds a secret, it breaks the build. If it finds a high or critical vulnerability, it breaks the build. Oh. If it finds a medium or low, please tell me later so I can put in my backlog. And then I also have a second, so I have three. So I'm being a nerd. I'm doing whatever I want, right? It's my open source project. So I have 3 different workflows that run, and only one of them actually publishes. So that one just checks for secrets and software composition analysis right now. But then I have the other ones checking a bunch of other things, especially with tools that have more false positives than others. And so then once I've tested it enough in this asynchronous pipeline that just runs no matter what, and I feel that it is only serving me true positives at this point, then it can graduate into the real pipeline. Because I really have learned that one of the biggest things in DevOps is that you only break the build if you have a damn good reason. And if you as a security person come and put something like, someone told me they put in a static application security testing tool, which I won't name. And it's an awesome tool. I've used it. It's amazing. But not in a pipeline. What are you doing?
Right.
It's very thorough. And let's say it scans 20,000 lines of code. It might find 200 potential issues. But there's really only 20 problems when you analyze all those things. Right. And it takes like a week or 2 or 3 weeks to go through those results. You can't have that triggering 200 times in your pipeline. Your software developers are going to be like, where's your problem? Right. So instead, I want to put sure things in the pipeline, and then things that I'm not sure about go in like an asynchronous pipeline that can just run and do all of my bidding, and then I'll come check it later.
So I'm looking at this one because I went to the security marketplace actions, and here, you're all going to have to do theater of the mind because I'm just going to share my screen here with my folks on the screen here. It's called SecretScan. It scans your repo for secrets, AWS keys, tokens. This has you covered. It was made by a gentleman or a person called Max, and it says workflow, find secrets, bracket on equals push, resolves equal max / secret scan. So this isn't really giving you all of the code. This is kind of a placeholder for whatever secret scan is, right? So there could still be some stuff inside of secret scan that could cause some issues.
Yeah. So if you click that green button that says use latest version.
I just can't believe you made me click that button. It's completely
okay. So see, that's all it does is it calls that.
Okay.
So when you have that run your workflow, you'll be able to see all of it, the things it calls out into Docker. But before that, it doesn't really show you.
Okay, so this is very much has the same kind of threat surface as your Node.js is out there, where it's like Max could give up secret scan to someone else all of a sudden, and now you've got God knows what's running in secret-scan at 1.0.0 or 1.0.1, and now you're mining Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I've already looked at this. Like, if you look at the issues, one of them's mine. And it turns out that their documentation isn't very clear about what it actually covers. So, yeah, so could not find connection string. So it turns out it just doesn't support .NET.
Oh.
And I think it just works for Python. And I'm like, oh, well, why doesn't it say that it only works for Python?
It only uses Python 2.7 at that, which is even worse.
Yeah.
So,
but so like, it doesn't even like, no offense, Max. I appreciate what you're doing. I just want more documentation, Max. So I understand.
Offense, Max. Right? Take offense. I'm just
kidding.
Don't.
I feel like we were really nice to each other. But yeah, so he was like, just use like the original Truffle Hog and don't bother using this one.
Okay.
And so then I worked with someone named Ed Plateau instead, and I got it going. But I guess like, to me, this isn't enough documentation.
Right. Right.
So some of them have like a more documentation. Like if you look at the Sneak CLI one, that one has better documentation, but that is a company that made it.
Right. Oh, and just like in Twitter, it's got a little green checkbox by it. Probably that means it was made by that company.
Yeah. So a green checkbox, good. If it doesn't have one, use at your own risk.
Right.
Still, using at your own risk, you might end up saying that you like it and then making your own action that you use.
Okay.
It's worth it if there's a tool that you use internally that you really like and that you want to use in GitHub Actions.
Right.
If the vendor won't make it for you, you can make it. And if you're the type of person that likes to share, then you can actually send it to the vendor and say, please check this and make this official. Like, I want one.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we just had Ms. Miller on, Alyssa Miller on a couple weeks ago, and she works for Sneak. I just remember that. So,
yeah, she does. Yeah. She's my friend. She's great.
Yay, bully. All right. Yeah. So, all right. So there's some caveats with this, just like any dependency generating or dependency using marketplace kind of app. You might want to go in and poke around at the code. It is easy to implement, but use the legit companies, ideally with the green check mark. Take a look. Oh, Nextploit.
And keep looking back at this, because this has quadrupled since I've started looking at it. So basically, like, I have written a lot of these vendors personally and said, please make me one.
Okay.
And some of them are responding, which is cool. So there were I think the first time I looked, there were only 36 security plugins. And now I think you saw there was 130.
Oh yeah.
And that's just since January. So people are really moving on this. 112 now.
Yeah.
There were 36 the first time I looked, and then the next time I looked, it was in the 40s. Wow. And I was like, I think I have to check back all the time to see what cool stuff has come out.
Yeah, the other thing that gets me is look at all the chat programs they have. They of course have Slack, but Team Hub, Ding Talk. You can send yourself a Facebook notification message, Ding Ding notification. They have IRC, so if you're old school like that. Slack bots, Telegram notifications, JitBit. So, wow, there's a lot of them. So
apparently you can tweet.
Tweet? Did I miss that one?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Right. Twitter action. Yeah. Okay. Oh, so this one's got a little bit more stuff in it. So you do have to give it your Twitter consumer key, your Twitter consumer secret, and your access token, amongst other things. Oh, and your Twitter access secret. So there's a lot of Twitternesses here. Yeah.
I'd hope so. If it's the one that tweets for you, you want to make sure that it doesn't just tweet for anyone.
That's true. But so you have to actually build this one, and it runs in Go. So do you worry about having multiple programming languages in your environment? I mean, you said that one the one you mentioned earlier runs in Python. This is in Go. Does that add a level of complexity and problem that, instead of having everything run in one language?
Well, it's running in its own little container.
Oh, right.
Inside the cloud that is GitHub, right? So it's not my environment.
Sure.
I'm not letting that inside my network. Not that Go or Python are bad inherently, but the less complex your tech stack, the more easy it is to take care of.
Yeah. I think the problem with this is there's going to be a lot of developers like, with Node.js, they're just not going to care. They're going to pick whatever solves their problem and continue on and not actually look at these things. So they're going to have to find some way to moderate this or secure it in some way before it gets out of hand, because they've already started just allowing people to start adding, GitHub links on there and, various things. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. But
yes, I agree. I have a feeling at some point that the people that do software composition analysis will add these to it.
Cool. All right.
I would like it if they did that, or maybe there'll be a team that does that tests these and like gives them the green check mark or not.
You mean a tool that tests these tools for other people to use in their tools?
A tool
Defense in
that
depth
would verify that the version of the GitHub action that you are using is known to be secure, is not known to be insecure. How about that?
There
not
we go.
Known
there
to
we
be
go.
insecure.
It's all turtles all the way down. It's all good. It's all good. All right. So before we go, Mr. Betcher, unless you had a question or two. Okay. You don't use GitHub, right, Mr. Betcher? You're old school. You just keep it on your laptop, right?
Keep it on my laptop.
Nice. Solid.
Edit it live on the prod server because it's easier that way.
That's right, man. We'll fly by the seat of our pants. So in addition to your shehackspurple.dev site and the learning that you're putting out, some of which is the server-side request forgery, you go into far more depth than what you just did with our little 20-minute discussion, I'd imagine. There's way more content than just that on the site. So not only server-side request forgery, you had some other topics as well?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to cover all of AppSec, basically, all about how to secure software. I'm also going to talk about Azure security and like generalized cloud security and DevSecOps, so weaving security through DevOps. I'm going to start with my first hands-on course being in GitHub Actions because that's my current obsession. However, for instance, I'm making a lot of short videos on things because I just live security. So for instance, I just signed up for an AWS account because there's a new product that I'm being given free access to, Score.
Nice.
And so then I made a video of like how to turn on MFA and then how to store that in my password manager. And so then that's going to be like a little tiny lesson about how to do 2FA in a password manager.
Okay.
And so sometimes it's just like little lessons, but I'm planning to create like a full course. Basically, it is my dream to create AppSec engineers. That's my dream. Nice. I want to create a full program of study. And if I can make enough money to afford it, I want to have a person that when you complete the program of study, they get you interviews. So I actually didn't come up with that idea. I was at a job fair and someone was saying like, yeah, your first grad, I want to meet them and hire them. And I was laughing and they're like, no, I'm not kidding. I'm like, well, actually I have like a super fan that, consumes all of my stuff. And she just got laid off and he just hired her. He was like, interview now. Like, I'll interview someone. If you're saying like they follow all your stuff and do all your exercises and went to all your workshops, like, yeah. And so she works there now. Amazing.
Very nice.
And so I'm hoping that once I have like this full course load, if I can get people job interviews and get them their first job placement that's paid, then hopefully they can make their money back. But more importantly, we're not going to have enough senior AppSec people if we don't have junior AppSec people.
Right.
So I want to try to help create some sort of pipeline of qualified individuals that can do boots on the ground. I feel like there's like a lot of really super cool training. I've taken a lot of super cool InfoSec training where it's like, learn how to do this cool, wicked hack.
Right.
Except for none of that is stuff I do at work ever.
Right.
Like, I feel like a lot of the courses I take are really, really cool, interesting stuff, but that don't help me. Like, we're going to implement a WAF at work. What do I need to know? Rather than a really super obscure hack of how to get past a WAF. which is what I see a lot of conference talks be about. It's more like I meet with clients and I talk with them about this. So that means I'm going to make a lesson for all my students of like, these are the things you want to know when implementing a WAF, or this is why you choose a WAF and this is why you choose a RASP. And like, what is the price point difference on average? And like, what are things that you need to ask the vendor? So I'm not going to tell you buy from this vendor. I'm going to tell you like, you want these things.
Right.
And if they don't have these things, ask them why, or check out their competitors.
Right. What I'd like to see, and this is coming from somebody who is having to unlearn a lot of his PM understanding because I'm going for my PMP, and then I'll be going for my Scrum Master eventually. But I hear PMP is far harder than Scrum Master. Developers need to understand the basics, user stories. You know, if you're wanting junior developers, they need to understand how Sprint works, how Kanbans work, how how to write proper documentation, how to document your code properly. I would think a quick 10 to 15 minute video on, okay, so you want to be a developer. These are some of the things that you're going to have to deal with. These are the minutia and the crap that, if you learn it now, then you don't have to, unlearn it and learn it the right way. There needs to be some kind of methodology that you can go, okay, this is how you should be doing it. And then when they learn it, they're like, oh, we don't do any of that at my workplace like that. And then that brings ideas back so that they can integrate that potentially into their own environment. Things, like I said, user stories, documentation, the various roles of people, maybe understanding how to use Git. Maybe Git is not something that they've ever used before. Maybe they don't use Git. Maybe they use a different versioning software. So, those would be something I would actually like watching myself, only because I don't use Git. So, because I'm not a filthy developer. So, I look forward to your angry emails, developers. I appreciate that. So I look forward to. We're not filthy. Okay, great. You're a developer. Okay, I get it. So,
I'm actually working on a book that's for developers.
I was about to ask about that. There was a segue there. So tell us about Allison Bob learning application security. What is that book going to be about?
So I'm dyslexic, and so I learn in all sorts of different ways. And so I decided that I wanted to create a book that someone like me would love to consume. There's currently, I believe, 7 English language books that cover the topic of software security, including the Web App Hacker's Handbook, which is amazing. But, oh my gosh,
right over there.
For me, sitting down and trying to read that, it was like torture. Like, the guy that wrote it is brilliant and amazing. And I'm like, you're awesome. But for me, it was really hard to absorb that content. And so Alice and Bob are, the people that showed us how to do a TLS handshake, or an SSL handshake, actually. It goes back that far. And so I've been using Alice and Bob in my blogs and in my talks for a while. And so basically I talk about, so each different chapter covers a different area of things that I believe either software developers or application security professionals need to know to do their job. So the one I'm writing right now is testing. So I'll explain, from a technical standpoint, the thing that I want. And sometimes I have code. And then I explain an analogy of why you need it. And then I have a story about Alice or Bob, or sometimes both of them, and then how it affects their lives. It's like, why do we have this policy? Or what does regression testing really mean? Oh, well, Bob, when he used to work here, this happened and blah, blah, blah. And so some of these are stories that people have told me where I've, removed the names to protect the innocent. Mm-hmm. And some of them are fictional things that I've come up with to demonstrate points and like why we do the things we do. And then I also have diagrams and just anything I can come up with to try to get the message across in as many different ways as possible, because I want this to be a book where it's easy to read. So it's a casual language textbook.
Okay.
So I talked Wylie into saying yes to this. I'm so happy they're on board for my very weird textbook idea, because most textbooks are very formal. I suck at being formal, as very obvious in this podcast.
Oh no, we're super informal. You're not a problem. Yeah, not a problem.
But the thing is with textbooks is that's usually what they're like. And so I want to have, tips and tricks that are things like, this was invented here by these people and they're cool. Maybe you should follow them on Twitter, which is not something that maybe someone would normally have in a textbook, but it's the type of stuff people want to know.
Right.
Or like, this was invented here and then this and this and this happened, but this is where we are as of this writing. This is probably where we still are, but you might want to check here or with this organization because this might have changed, etc. I want to make the book as timeless as possible.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because, we're talking about, GitHub Actions and, you had major changes in it just in the last month. If you're writing something now, if it goes to publish, you told us before we started fall, winter 2020, is it as evergreen as, in 5 years, or is it going to be like, oh, wow, we don't do any of that now, or would that just be a reason to do a second or a third edition, that kind of stuff? I mean, you're obviously, I guess you're trying to make this as evergreen as possible.
I am definitely trying to make it something that can last the ages.
Nice.
You may be aware that the Web App Hacker's Handbook only has 2 editions. It was published in 2008. It still applies.
Oh.
It makes me happy that I can still buy a book and like learn all of the useful stuff. It makes me tragically sad and want to cry a lot that the same problems are still happening and that we don't have a handle on these things yet. Like we still suck at authentication and authorization. We still have lots of developers that are like, I'll write my own security functionality. I think I'm smart enough to make my own encryption algorithm. Like all of these things. Yes.
No, don't write your own encryption algorithm, please. ROT17 is not encryption.
Yes. Base64 encoding it twice. No.
It's hurtful.
Anyway, yeah.
It's hurtful.
So I'm hoping to make it as timeless as possible. I have 2 really amazing technical editors that are trying to make it troll proof as well. We'll see how that goes.
Cool.
But yeah.
Okay.
Basically timeless advice. That is my plan for the book, in making it as easy to understand as possible. And then for more specific things or hands-on things, come to the website and I'll teach you the stuff.
Right on. Okay. So when, you're not making curriculum and authoring books and you have a Twitch channel, so you're doing regular stuff on there as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us when the next one is going to be? 2 weeks in.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I'm going to look at my schedule because that will help.
Yeah.
Basically, if people join my mailing list and I'll give you a link,
okay,
then I will be able to tell you all the things that I'm doing. I just keep updating it. So on April 10th, I'm going to be doing a GitHub Actions live stream from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. So if you go to twitch.tv/shehackspurple, or just sign up for my mailing list, which we will put in the notes for this podcast, basically I'll just keep sending you my schedule over and over again and updating it. Because I'm actually speaking online at a plethora of different events over the next couple of months, because every single travel engagement I had was canceled, and then some of them are switching it to be online, which is awesome. Fantastic. So I'm interacting with people online at least twice every week until the pandemic is over. Awesome. That's my commitment to my followers and my members. But it'll likely be a lot more than that based on all the things I'm seeing from all the different invites I'm getting from various communities. And it's exciting. Like I streamed yesterday morning to India for OWASP Bangalore. Really cool, right? However, people from around the world could come.
Very nice. Okay.
Like, because they opened it to everyone. I'm just like, this is great.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I appreciate our new normal in terms of education, because there's so many people out there that don't have the budget to travel. They don't have an education budget. Everything they do has to come out of their own pocket, and that can get very expensive if you go to a Circle City Con or something and you spend a couple $1,000s for training or something, that can get expensive real quick, and then your budget's gone, and instead you can go to an online B-Sides Atlanta like we had last weekend, 2 weekends ago. There's a bunch of them that are being converted. Circle City Con in June, I heard. I have to cancel my flights for that because I was planning on going to that, but they've gone virtual as well. I don't know if they still have, I'm certain they still have tickets because virtual opens up a whole new realm of ways of doing this. And I kind of hope that even after we go back, post coronavirus, that there'll still be opportunities like this for people that, you hear people like, Jason Street, who, probably travel 200 days a year going to various conferences to speak or to, just be or do and help out and support those. If he's got 150 days a year and he's spending 50 days in virtual conferences at home, that's more time he can spend with his family. People can, do less travel, maybe not get gold status on every airline. So I'm looking forward to seeing more virtual conferences and virtual content in the future. So we should keep it up as a community. So
I hope so too.
Cool. All right, Mr. Betcher, any last thoughts from you, sir?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast again. You two are a pleasure. I still am looking forward to the day where I get to meet Amanda. She's like the pokeroo. You just use her to get to me, and then she's not there. So now I'm going to have to come on again, right?
Yes, you will have to come on again. I'm sure we will have more opportunities for you to come on and discuss and share your knowledge, especially on the DevOps stuff. That seems to be very popular when we have DevOps episodes on here. So, all right. So, She Hacks Purple on Twitter is your Twitter handle.
Yep.
Okay.
And on GitHub and basically like all the platforms, I'm She Hacks Purple on Twitch, on Mixer, on everything I can think of, except for LinkedIn, where it's my name. People are like, who's that?
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Betcher, tell us what you're doing and what's going on with you and how people can get a hold of you to talk about those things.
Well, I'm still doing the filthy dev things for LogMD. We're putting in some cool stuff and hoping to release another release soon. You can check that out at log-md.com.
Fantastic.
And my Twitter is there as well.
Right on. And Miss Berlin, of course, if you're on Twitter, please send her some love. She's going through a little bit right now, a little drama in the life. So, send her some love on Twitter. You can find her at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. And you can follow me on Twitter. It's just Brian Brake, first and last name, no spaces or ampersands or anything. And the podcast Twitter is at Brakesec. And if you are interested in joining our Slack, we've got a specific COVID-19 channel because I didn't want a bunch of COVID discussion all over our Slack. So there's a dedicated channel for that where you can talk about that to your heart's content. But we also have other channels, Sim and Logging. We have our book club, which is actually happening. Well, it's finished for the night right now, but it's going on every Monday night, I believe from 6 to 8 Pacific time. So if you're interested in doing that, we have regular moderation. You get the book, you read, we're better than Oprah's book club, I think, in this case. So I think we're doing pen testing of AWS. It's a packed publishing book written by Ben Caudle from RhinoSec. We've had him on the show as well, talking about Paku, which is their audit tool for AWS. But you buy that book, you go through the chapters, you set up the environment, you go through the exercises, you talk about what you've learned. There are other like-minded individuals doing the same thing. We have one for the U.S. folks, and then I think on Saturdays or Sundays, we also have one for the EMEA region, so Europe, Asia, Middle East areas. We're doing that, so you can also join in if you'd like. The U.S. one actually still works for folks in the Asia Pacific region. You just have to do it earlier in the day. So if you're interested in doing that, send us a DM to Brakesec or send us an email to bds.podcast@gmail.com. Saturday mornings or on Saturdays, PonySec, one of our contributors, does the CTF club. So he's gone through some trainings and some discussion let me see what he was doing on. I think he was going to do it on Cores this week, which is the cross-origin resource sharing. But I know that he likes to record some content, put it up on our YouTube channel. So if you happen to miss it, you can always grab it again. We've expanded the CTF Club channel to discuss education and webinars. So anything that comes out that's free, we just recently put up a accelerated assembly course on reverse engineering. He's going to do it on, Cores Labs from Portswigger. So we'll have that video up eventually. And so any education links you have, you can drop those in the CTF Club. But like I said, send us an email, bds.podcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Brakesec. And thank you to our patrons. We know that, you have other options for giving your money to, like your rent or food or your family. And we appreciate the $1 or $2 that you give us every month to help us out with the podcast. It goes to domain registering. It goes to paying for the Zoom that we're using. We're hip and trendy, by the way. Everybody's using Zoom now, being work from home. Zoom's popularity just exploded. We're on the cutting edge. We were hipsters, man. We were, it's all mainstream now. Everybody's using Zoom. Anyway,
trying to find something else.
I know, right? Now I got to use Jitsi or whatever god awful thing that is. So we have a Brakesec store. If you cannot give, you don't want to give to the Patreon, but you want something back, we have shirts, we have coffee mugs. We can give you, bath towels. I think it does bath towels. But you can get logos. You can get whatever you want on there. So if you go to brakesec.com/store, you can get to our TPub site. We appreciate all of the help and support that we're getting on our Slack and from people online, and everybody's being real positive and helping out. So, please feel free to leave us some feedback if you got value from listening to Tanya on the show this week talking about SSRF and Github Actions. We appreciate the exposure that gets on the various podcasting platforms. So, all right, well, that was it for this week. Take care of yourself. Be kind to one another. Stay safe. Stay inside. Practice social distancing. Practice mental health. Find somebody to talk to, even if it's on a Zoom or something. If you need to, get on our Slack and we'll get on a Zoom and talk together. But the mental health aspect is going to be very important here in the next month or 2 or 3, depending on how long this goes. So stay positive and try to make it through as best you can. And hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.